Hi, everyone. My name is Enid Brown, and today we're going to be talking about the 7 pillars of strategic accessibility. So we're going to start with a bit about who I am. To give you a visual description, I am a dark-skinned Black woman. I'm currently wearing braids that are pulled into a bun on the top of my head. I like to say that I have a bright smile and rosy cheeks, and I'm currently wearing a pink sweatshirt. I currently serve as the head of product accessibility at Riot Games. I also have a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech and a master's in digital media design from NYU. So how did I get here? I spent what I would consider the first third or so, maybe half of my career in information technology. I worked for Accenture and then JVN. And then I moved on to education technology, working at Sesame Workshop, BrainPop, and then Instructure. And currently, as I mentioned before, I work in gaming for Riot Games. And so you can see that my career has spanned over several industries, all with the commonality of having technology be the core of what I do. And what I have found in each of these industries is that accessibility is just as important in each of them, and that when we focus on providing equitable and accessible experiences for users, we provide a better user experience for everyone. So it doesn't matter what industry you're coming from, it doesn't matter what you're focusing on, accessibility is important through it all. So why do I do this work? I always pause at this point in my presentation to talk about why this work is important to me, because I think it gives some context as to why I do what I do and how I kind of ended up here. I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm an immigrant. And so what that has meant for me is that I've often been placed in spaces that were not designed for me. They were not necessarily designed for me to succeed in them. They were not necessarily designed for me to thrive in them. And so as I started working in this space of technology and digital media and games, what I found important is that as a person of privilege in this space, as someone with no known physical disabilities, it's important for me to use my privilege to serve a community in a way that is meaningful, because I understand what it means to be the person operating in a system that is not designed for me to succeed and isn't designed to give me an equitable experience. So I come into the space of accessibility with that in mind, understanding my privilege in this space and coming from a space of non-privilege in other areas. I also like to talk about the yellow couch. Sometimes it's red, sometimes it's blue. But the idea here is that when I talk about why the work of accessibility is important, I often like to ask my listeners or my viewers to think about a very comfortable chair. It can be yellow, it can be red, it can be blue, it can be green. But the idea is that this chair is really, really comfortable, and you walk into a room and it's the only chair in the room and you want to sit in it. And so you start moving towards the chair and you hear a voice say, wait, only people who have Black hair and brown eyes can sit in this chair. And so a lot of people may fall into that category. And then the voice says, no, wait, but you have to have Black hair, brown eyes, and braces. And so that automatically eliminates another subset of people. And then it says, no, well, it needs Black hair, brown eyes, braces, and green pants. And so you get the idea. The idea is that less and less people are now able to sit in this chair. And so this is what we do when we don't create accessible spaces for our users or for our players, is that we essentially create this very comfortable chair in the middle of a room that only very specific people can sit in, only very specific people can experience. And so for me, it's a reminder constantly of why the work that we're doing around accessibility is important. Let's talk about the why. So creating accessible technology, games, content, digital spaces is important in every industry. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in information technology, I've been in ed tech, I've been in gaming, and this work is important regardless. The disability here is not the barrier. The barrier exists because we create things, games, technology, digital spaces that fail to account for the different abilities and needs of its users. That is what we need to tackle. So what is strategic accessibility? Strategic accessibility is a holistic approach to accessibility within an organization. It is not just focusing on compliance and testing. which a lot of us do as we get started in accessibility. And we have to start somewhere. So I'm not blaming you for that. I'm not knocking you for that. We have to start somewhere. But when we think about strategic accessibility, we're not just focusing on compliance and testing. We really want to focus on accessibility as a practice and not a project. So this is something that has to be consistently and constantly integrated into our processes. And we have to constantly check them, make sure if they need improving. So it's about process integration and change consistently. So strategic accessibility, I've divided into 7 pillars that I like to call DET-PACE for short. But the idea here is that we are focusing on design and development, empathy, testing and validation, partnership, auditing and compliance, communication, and then education and training. What I really want to point out here is that it is not one thing. All these things create a strategic approach to accessibility within our organizations, within our companies, as we approach accessibility. So we're going to start with design and development. So design and development infuses accessibility into the product development lifecycle. It's things like implementing accessibility by design. We need to think about accessibility from the start as we're scoping, as we're thinking about what the possibilities of this project or product can be. We need to think about accessibility from the beginning. It means creating accessibility guidelines and guardrails. So what are our hard stopping points? Do we say if we have accessibility bugs that this product doesn't launch? That's a guardrail. In terms of guidelines, do we say we need to cover all WCAG 2.0 AA standards? That's a guideline for us, right? And so we need to also document best practices. The idea here is that for example, our design team should have a list of best practices that they go into so that what ends up happening is that we have an inherently accessible product at the end of it. And then for this, we also need to, it also requires consistent process integration and change. So it's not one thing and then we stop. We have to constantly keep integrating accessibility into our processes and changing them as needed. So we talked about accessibility by design. So this is built into the entire product development lifecycle. In this way, every single team member becomes a participant and an advocate. It's not just the responsibility of one person. It's not just testing for accessibility at the end. It's our designers have a part to play, our developers have a part to play, our product owners have a part to play. So we all are participants in the accessibility process, and then we all become advocates for ensuring that the outcome is accessible. Requirements are met, and there's an accessible user experience that's created. What does this actually look like? So if we talk about the different stages of the product development lifecycle, we look at something like concepting and scoping. And so you may have accessibility requirements. You have to prioritize requirements. So you have to understand which are most important, which absolutely need to be met. And then we look at things like the user research stage. So in this stage, you may have accessibility personas, and you may do some user testing to make sure that the things that you're designing provide a good experience for our users. If we move on to design, things like visual contrast, we do design reviews. We may do some user testing here also to validate our designs. Move on to development, making sure we use standard components, making sure we have alt text, keyboard navigation, semantic HTML, and then QA, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, the idea of doing testing. So we have automated and manual testing. We have things like flash rate testing where we may use a Harding test, and then testing with screen readers to ensure that we can, our content is compatible with screen readers. Okay, so the next pillar is empathy. And what this pillar focuses on is building empathy within the organization. And what that really does is it helps our partners in accessibility to understand that we are not building this thing that lives over here for these people that we don't know or that we can't identify with. The idea is that it really helps to create a connection between our players and our users who are going to need to use the accessibility features and things that we build into our products, into our games. Although I always like to say that accessibility is necessary for some, but beneficial for all. And so the idea really is that anytime we build an accessibility feature, we build an accessible product, we're really building something for every single person. But this particular pillar is really focused on building empathy in the organization. This encourages advocacy. It really helps to get, people within the organization to say, hey, I know someone who actually uses this. So when they can see a person and when they can point to a person, it helps them really to advocate for the accessibility community in that way. One of the ways that we do this is establishing accessibility communities of practice. So sharing information about what's happening, sharing news, sharing events, helping people keep up to date about what's going on in the community, seeing that we're not the only ones tackling this, and that the things that we're doing are having effects out there in the world. It really helps to build that empathy within the organization, and it really humanizes the organization's efforts. So testing and validation is our third pillar. And what this really focuses on is evaluating designs through user research and testing. At this stage, we really want to measure and validate our designs against standards. And that could be organizational standards, that could be legal standards, WCAG, CVAA, but we want to measure and validate our designs against standards. We want to test the development work using our QA team. And then this also includes ongoing audits and regression testing. So really here, this is where normally if we think about accessibility as only being compliance, this would be a part of that traditionally. But since we're not going to think of it and that we have a strategic approach to accessibility, this is just one of our pillars. So this is really where we test and make sure that the things that we are creating at every stage along the process is tested and it's validated. So one of the ways that we can do this is through using accessibility personas. And so they really help us to design with accessibility in mind. Ideally, we want to use behavioral personas as opposed to traditional personas. And so we want to look at what particular behavior, what particular needs a user will have or a persona will have. We want to cover a wide range of abilities. And so where possible, we want to combine different abilities and different needs. So for example, we have something like someone who has low vision, who also has a fine motor skill disability, and who also may have ADHD. And then where possible, we want to use data and actual users. So we want to model our personas off of members of the accessibility community wherever possible. What could that look like? So this is a persona example. This is Michelle. Michelle is young, she's educated, she's sharp, and she's blind from birth. What technology does she need? So she needs the screen reader. She absolutely needs a keyboard, and she sometimes uses a Braille display. What are some of the typical issues that she may have? Some information is exclusively visual, and so if she cannot see it, she may not be able to experience it. The screen reader may not get access to some information controls. So if we are not creating games or products that are screen reader compatible, she may not have access to some information, even though she's using a screen reader. Navigating certain interfaces can be daunting for her, and keyboard access may not work or gets stuck at times. And so how do we meet Michelle's needs? The digital service, the game, the website must be accessible with a screen reader and a keyboard. We also need to perform manual usability testing with screen readers. So we need to actually test with screen readers. And then we need to perform user testing with users who rely solely on screen readers to ensure that not only are we meeting the technical compliance issue, so not only are screen readers able to access the game or the product, but also that it's a good user experience for a user who actually relies solely on screen readers. So partnership is our fourth pillar. And so partnership is focused on building relationships with the accessibility community. And so we can partner with organizations that focus on accessibility. We give back to the community. We partner with users with different abilities to provide insight and feedback. And so this kind of overlaps a little with something, if we think about doing usability testing, this is an opportunity for us to partner with the accessibility community. although we don't only have to partner in ways where we are getting something back, right? We can give back to those organizations. We can donate, we can do that. But the idea is that we have a relationship with the community. And so we're not just creating things for them and giving it to them, but what we are doing is partnering with them and working together with the accessibility community to create something that is useful. This also helps us to create a feedback channel, an informal feedback channel, especially if we're partnering in constant communication with the accessibility community. But also part of this is really creating a formal feedback channel within our organization. So things like making sure that we have player support team that has a ticketing or phone number or some sort of feedback channel that constantly exists for the accessibility community. Compliance and auditing is another pillar. And so again, as I mentioned, this is kind of where traditionally most of our programming around accessibility has focused. Compliance and auditing is a very easy place to start. And it's not wrong to start there, but we have to expand beyond that. And so compliance and testing talks about really assessing and maintaining compliance with legal accessibility standards. I'll expand this point to say that it doesn't have to be legal. It could be your organizational standards also. So you may have internally within your organization created a set of standards. And so compliance and auditing will focus on maintaining compliance with legal and organizational standards, and then making sure we document and report on your compliance status. That could be done internally, but also externally, so that the community at large, both the accessibility community and the general public, has an idea of where we stand in terms of compliance, what we're working on, what we have mastered or what we have done, what we're really good at, what we still have work to do on. And this is often a tricky one too, because it requires a space of honesty and vulnerability as an organization. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there and kind of say, hey, we are not really doing a good job at this. And hey, we're doing a really good job at this thing. But it requires us to kind of call ourselves out in a way and provide transparency to our users and our players around what we're good at and what we're not good at, and where we stand and where we still have work to do. So the next pillar is communication. And what this really focuses on is communicating program status within the organization. And so we need to make sure that our organizational leadership, the general organization, knows where we are, what we're doing. This is also around communicating compliance status. And as I said, this is both internally and externally, and then really communicating our accessibility approach. So our plans and our wins. This is especially important for the accessibility community. I think we have to do a good job at making sure that we talk about our approach, we talk about what we're doing well, we talk about what we're not doing well. And really, this is where we can shed a light to the world at large about what we're doing, why this work is important to us, and what plans we have when it comes to accessibility. So our last pillar is education and training. And this really focuses on building internal knowledge within the organization through curriculum and through courses. And this can be something that we create internally in the organization and require members of the organization to do. This could be us bringing in third-party consultants, vendors, to kind of conduct training. But the idea here is that we really want to make sure there's a baseline level of knowledge within the organization around what accessibility is, why it's important to us, what we're doing, what our approach to it is, and even some basic knowledge around the standards, whether that be external standards or internal organizational standards. But we really want to make sure we're building the knowledge of what accessibility is. What I found is that it's much easier for us to get people to do the work, to get us to be partners in this, to get us to be advocates in this, if we know what we're doing and if we know what it is. It's hard to go in and say, hey, let's do the work that's required for accessibility when nobody knows what accessibility is or what that word actually means. We also want to build specialized knowledge with functional and discipline teams. And so if you are a designer, we want to help you understand what accessibility means as a designer. What does accessibility mean as a member of the player support team? What does accessibility mean as a member of the development team? Because it means something different in some ways for each of those disciplines. And so we want to make sure that we're providing specialized knowledge around what it means for those functional teams. We also want to establish best practices. There are things that are going to be good for us to do as an organization within each team. And so we want to make sure that that's known and that's documented and that's established. It's an established practice. And so things like using semantic HTML are going to be good for our organization and good for our products. And so if we establish that that is a best practice, then we avoid some of the things that plague us in the accessibility world. And we also get some very easy wins when it comes to accessibility. We also want to document standard operating procedures for processes. So if we look at something like video production or even designing characters in a game, are there standard operating procedures that we can establish that will ensure that these processes create inherently accessible outcomes? If we are including accessibility from the very beginning and we have standard operating procedures, then we automatically create things that are inherently accessible. And a lot of the work of accessibility is done because we have these processes established already. Okay, so why does strategic accessibility work? This approach is proactive versus reactive. And what that means is we are constantly looking forward. What we are not doing is constantly looking back and trying to fix something that is already broken. Which is the problem when we think about compliance and testing as the only approach to accessibility. When we really are proactive instead of reactive, what we do is we, as I mentioned, inherently create things that are inherently accessible. So if we're designing with accessibility in mind and developing with accessibility in mind, when we get to testing, it's almost just something that we need to do because we need to do it and not because we actually think what we create is inaccessible. So we're testing, but we know that the product is already accessible because we've done the things in design and in development to create an accessible product. Strategic accessibility also allows for distributed ownership. So everyone is involved, from the product owner to the playtester or user testing, to the designer, to the developer, to QA. Every single person is involved along the way. Player support, marketing, every single person. So it's distributed ownership. So the burden of ensuring that what we create is accessible is a shared initiative. And so everyone feels like they are owners in this and that they have a part to play in doing this work. In an organization, it allows for buy-in at the highest level. And so when we think about strategic accessibility, we get buy-in at every level. We get buy-in from our management, we get buy-in from our stakeholders, we get buy-in from the individual discipline teams that are doing, or functional teams that are doing the work. But we absolutely get organizational buy-in at the highest level. The end user is allowed to influence the processes and the outcomes. And what this means is that because we partner with the accessibility community and because we do user testing and because we really get their feedback and input, and then even creating a feedback channel, we allow our users and our players to influence what we do, to influence the processes and to influence the outcome and the end products that we have. Because strategic accessibility requires constant evaluation and constant improvement, what we do is that we constantly evaluate the state and maturity of each pillar and program. And this allows us to keep improving, keep doing better, and just really creating accessible outcomes. And it appeals to every angle. So the ethical, this is the right thing to do, the financial, the technical, the legal, the user experience. And so we are attacking accessibility from various angles and making sure that we cover everything. In terms of prioritizing accessibility, we often have to think about impact versus cost versus effort. And so we think of things like, do we do the most popular feature or product first, which may be high impact? Do we do things like the most common disability? That also will give us high impact. Do we do low-hanging fruit, which is low effort, but may not have as high of an impact? And what stage in the product development lifecycle are we? So if we start at the very beginning, if we start in the scoping and the design stages, the effort may be lower. Whereas if we go to development and QA, maybe the effort is higher, because if we get to QA and we find out a product is not accessible, or we have to fix something, that requires a lot more effort. We may have to go all the way back to scoping or design to fix that problem. And so the stage in the product development lifecycle will have an impact on how much effort is required at that time. We have to look at things like, what is the cost of doing it now versus doing it later? We all know that the longer we create products that are not accessible, is the more debt, that more technical debt and more literal financial debt that we are creating, because when we have to go back and fix everything, that is going to cost us exponentially more than it would have if we would have done it from the beginning. And so we have to look at things like that as we think about prioritizing accessibility. There's sometimes a need to set hard cutoffs. So things like saying, if we do not pass flash rate testing, then we will not launch this product or feature, is a hard cutoff. It allows us to really think about prioritizing that work. So it is important to us, and we're going to do it because we know that if we do not pass this particular cutoff, then we're not going to launch, and that's going to cost us a lot of money. So it encourages us to do the work upfront and to prioritize accessibility. And then establishing gates and performing reviews in each stage of the cycle, in design and development and QA, really helps us to prioritize accessibility and to understand why it's important, and making sure that the end result is inherently accessible. So as I wrap up, here are a few important reminders. The work of accessibility is never done. This is not a checkbox that we are going to check and say, hey, it's done. We never have to look at it again. We're accessible and that's it. Accessibility is constantly evolving. We're constantly learning more about what our users need, what our players need, and how we can do a better job and give them a better user experience. And so it is never done. We are going to have to keep working at it, and keep making it better and better and improving it as we go along. It's a balancing act. So we have to think of our products. We want fun, we want user focused, we want equitable, we want accessible. And so it's a balancing act between all of those. Something may not be as fun, but may be super accessible and create an equitable user experience. And sometimes we have to figure out what the right trade-off is, what the right balance of each of those is as we create something, especially within the gaming industry. We often want the brightest flash and the quickest movements and all the fun things. And sometimes there's a bit of a trade-off when we think about accessibility. What is the right balance for us? How do we make sure that it's fun, that it's user-focused, that it's equitable, and that it's also accessible? And then accessibility is always evolving. Standards change, standards get updated, standards are improved. We have guidelines, user needs change, hardware changes, software changes. And so as all of this evolves, we have to constantly evolve with it and ensure that we are keeping up and that we are serving our users and serving the accessibility community in the best way possible. And that is it today. Thank you all for listening, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope it was very informative for you today.